This is Entrance A, a drop-off and pickup area. All SIS entrances are manned by our friendly and professional security personnel 24 hours a day. All visitors are required to register to gain entry. This is our entrance fee, which is connected to the rest of Sunway campus, college, and university. Welcome to our reception area. On your right is the admin office where all your admissions and administrative queries will be assisted. Here, we have 2 meeting rooms mainly used by the staff, teachers, and parents. This is the Guidance and Career Center. This center is a safe, welcoming space for all students for one-on-one counseling about pathways, course selection, career options, and social and emotional well-being. And here we have our academic office where all academic results and subject enrollment are handled. This is one of our 5 science labs. Fun fact, I had my chemistry class here last semester. All SIS students are given a locker. It is a convenient way to keep our items safe. Here we have one of our many study areas around the school. This is the SIS Hall. We use it for indoor sports, assemblies, events, performance nights, and many more. And sometimes, us boarders use it for gatherings and sports night. Check out this view, the best view of Sunway City. This is our IT room. We have the IT personnel that are on standby to assist us with the IT needs, such as Wi-Fi connection issues and printing of assignments. We also have the 3D printer readily available to support our learning needs. First floor is generally used for our grade 7 and 8 students. Let's take a peek at one of their classrooms. Each classroom is equipped with a projector and a smartboard set. Since SIS is a technological school, all students starting in grade 8 onwards are required to have a laptop. There are a total of 34 classrooms in Sunway International School. Let's check out some of our other classrooms. Bonjour! This is our French room. In Canada, French is a second language. Hence, French is a mandatory subject for students grade 7 until 9. This is our communication technology classroom. We learn basic coding, photography, graphic design, and photo editing in high school. This art room is for visual art classes. In visual arts, students have the opportunity to explore different art forms including sketching, painting, printmaking, and more. Music is taught in grade 9, where students will learn basic guitar, keyboard, and other instruments. At SIS, we have about 800 students, which is why we have 2 cafeterias. Hello everyone, so right now we're standing in the SIS library, which is open from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays, and it's usually very full during lunch and after school hours. This classroom here holds a reserved collection such as textbooks for grades 7 and 8, board games, and other special teaching and learning materials. There are 5 zones in the library. Silent Study Zone, where the students use the personal cubicle for self-study, especially during exam period. Noise is completely prohibited here. Leisure Zone, for relaxed reading, such as reading some newspapers and magazines. Media Zone, choose any DVD or CD to watch and we'll provide headphones if students need one. Collaborative Study Zone, students are allowed to have discussion while tutoring in medium voice level. That is why this zone is located at the back of the library. Last but not least, the Printing Zone. Students are able to use the printer here to print homework or assignments. Here's our sick bay and our in-house nurse on duty, who is in charge of the safety and health of the students. Our SIS house can accommodate a total of 120 students. This boarding facility is exclusively offered to SIS students from abroad and out of state. A team of 4 live-in caretakers oversees our welfare at SIS house. Hi, welcome to my unit. Come on in. Each unit is fully equipped with a living room, dining area, pantry, and washrooms. There are 3 twin shared bedrooms in each unit, plus Wi-Fi and laundry services are provided. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour for today. Thank you for your time. We hope to see you soon at Sunway International School. Bye!
Hey everyone, welcome to Sunway International School. I'm Gediminas and I'm from Lithuania. At SIS we have students from all over the world. And when I say all over the world, I'm talking about over 30 countries. Come, let's go. Come join me for my drama class. Today we're learning about scene study and everyone's rehearsing their lines.
Konnichiwa, I'm Momoka from Japan and I've been here for 4 years. Come join my science class.
Whoa, almost dropped it there. I'm Michael and I'm from Papua New Guinea. Yeah, it's hard to meet other people from my country here, but it's pretty easy to make new friends in SIS. Well, gotta go. See ya.
Bonjour, bienvenue dans la classe. My name is Niall and I'm from Kazakhstan. I have been studying in SIS since 2018. Over to you, Gediminas.
Welcome to our computer studies class. Today we're learning about the internet and how it works.
안녕하세요, I'm Soyun and I'm from South Korea. Check out my communications technology class. I'm taking this subject as part of my credits for the Ontario Secondary School Diploma.
Let's check out our music class.
Before you leave, come and check out our boarding at SIS House. SIS House can hold over 100 boarders and we have students from all over the world. We sometimes have local students staying here, and when everyone's around, it becomes this huge mosaic of cultures. Here are some of the facilities we have here.
Thanks for visiting us at SIS. It's been fun introducing you to our international community. Looking forward to seeing you around. Bye. Sayonara.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking time out of your Friday evening to join us here at Sunway International School. My name is Heath Condro. I'm the principal of Sunway International School. And before we get started and before I do my introductions for this evening, I would just like to share a couple of things before we do get started. I hope you've got yourself a coffee or a beverage to get through our next hour of discussion. Essentially what we'll be doing is we'll be going through a discussion between myself and our three panelists with some content presented on some slides. And following that, we'll have a question and answer session. And what we found works best in these question and answer sessions and these online sessions is if any of you do have questions, I would ask that you type the questions in the chat box that appears on the right-hand side of the Zoom software. This allows us to ensure that we don't miss a question. If you do have a question that comes to mind and you don't want to lose it, type it into the chat box. We'll make sure that we get to it. And it also allows every participant, whether you're an observer or whether it's one of our panelists, to actually look at the question and then we'll get to the answer of it. However, if there is somebody that does want to do it the traditional way in terms of unmuting your microphone and asking a question, by all means, we're here to share as much information with everybody as we possibly can. What I will ask before I get into the introductions is that for anybody here that's joining us tonight, that while our panelists are speaking, that microphones are muted so that the communication aspect of tonight is not interfered with. So if everybody could mute their microphones, that would be very much appreciated. And at this time, I would like to get into my introduction of our speakers. One of our speakers joining us today is Mr. Guy Paring. Guy Paring is Regional Director of Southeast Asia for iGraduate, an independent benchmarking and consultancy firm. He leads the operations for iGraduate for the ASEAN region, and he brings more than 25 years of experience in the field of education. Thank you for joining us, Guy. Our second panelist this evening is Ms. Elizabeth Wong. She's in charge of community engagement, and she is the content curator and founder of Malaysian International Schools Parent Support Group, or MISPSG. Serving parents and the public since 2012, and with more than 30,000 active members, Elizabeth's support group has been an incredibly valuable source of reliable information about the growing international school landscape in Malaysia. And she also provides information, and her group provides information and online events for those interested in international education within Malaysia. Our third panelist is Dr. Chiang Mian. Dr. Mian is the Executive Director for Sunway International Schools and the Director of Pre-University Studies at Sunway College, and brings more than 30 years experience in various levels of Malaysian, Canadian, British, and Australian education systems. So, our theme for tonight, why international schools remain the choice of many parents. To provide you with a bit of information and background for our sessions tonight, I'd like to draw your attention to the slide on the screen. On the left side of the screen, we see considerable growth of international schools over the past 20 years and the corresponding growth of student enrollment. And this is primarily on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, this is internationally. On the left-hand side, we see the growth of international schools in Malaysia. On the right-hand side of the screen, again, we have the graphical representation of the number of international schools in Malaysia. For someone such as myself, who has been in Malaysia since 2012, this rate of growth is not only surprising, but makes me ask, how did this happen? And is it a model of growth that is sustainable? This slide shows the growth of Malaysian students in international schools in Malaysia. Please note this is pre-COVID-19 time period. Yes, there has been a noticeable increase for a number of reasons, such as government policy changes, location of new or additional campuses, or greater curricular choices. But even with this student growth, the ever-crowded playing field of international schools is getting more and more crowded. Parents and guardians must be ever more aware of their options and the information that will help them make the best choice for their child and arrive at the right answer to the question, is this the right international school that best suits my child? And really, that's what everybody is here to find out and to discuss. And on that note, I now open the discussion to our guests for this evening. So I'll start with Guy. Guy, again, thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Could you tell me why you think there are more schools offering international curriculum now?
Thanks, Heath. Well, I think there are a number of interlocking and related factors in both the rise of international schools and indeed those schools who offer international curriculum. The growth is very apparent in Malaysia, as indeed you've shown of those graphs. But we've seen continued growth in international schools across Asia, in China, in Japan, in Thailand, and even Singapore. They're all experiencing growth. And I think there are some factors they share in why that growth is happening. The first, I think, is language. You know, the language of instruction is an issue across Asia. And whether we like it or not, English is the global language. And for many students, it's the key skill for future success. So I think that's one factor. I also think that dissatisfaction with state or public provision is also rising. So an education can become very politicized very quickly. And we've seen that in Hong Kong. We've seen it in Malaysia, clearly, which hasn't been immune to changes in policy, which aren't really considering the well-being of the students. So I think there's a sort of growing dissatisfaction with the state system. And also I think the systems globally, in terms of state systems, they can almost be a straitjacket with which teachers have to operate in, whereas I think more international curriculum and international schools is more of a framework where teachers can adapt based on their own context. I also think that parents are looking for more holistic forms of education, and many international schools offer that, focusing on development of the whole child. And I think perhaps finally, and it's an obvious answer perhaps, but the main reason for the rise in international schools across Asia is the emergence of a much larger middle class who have the resources to devote to education. And, you know, as we all know, Asian parents will always prioritize education. And if they have the resources and they see that international schools make more sense for their child, then they will go for those international schools. So I hope that answers the questions. I think there's a whole series of interlocking factors, and Malaysia is not unique. And I think many of the other countries around Asia share some of those same features.
Great, thank you. You're absolutely right. It's never a simple answer, and there's, for every one or two issues that you speak about, there's another 10 that we don't have time to get into, but you're absolutely right. Mian, I'd like to ask you, can you share your view about the current international school setting in Malaysia? Because it's certainly one that needs to be talked about.
Certainly, Heath. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'd like to draw on the data that you had shared with us earlier. So there are something like 200 over private or international schools in Malaysia. And so I think, you know, that poses a very challenging and sometimes baffling situation, right, for a lot of parents. So I think to address your question, I'd like to maybe first of all, define or get a common understanding on how parents in Malaysia generally would consider a school as an international school. And I think most of us would agree that an international school for most families in Malaysia would mean an Anglophone-based school or an English-speaking school. And so this leads to a lot of schools being categorized as international schools. And if I may take a moment or two to just maybe from my perspective for Malaysia, sort of categorize or put the schools in certain groups based on characteristics to help parents get their heads hopefully around the types of schools. Yeah. So I've put it on the screen here that generally we can view international or private schools that offer an English speaking or Anglophone curriculum in 4 or 5 categories. Way back in the 1960s, we started with expatriate schools, and these would be schools that offer the British curriculum or the American curriculum to serve the needs of very large populations or communities of expatriates in Malaysia. But we must not forget that expatriate schools aren't just the English-speaking ones. They should also include the Japanese international, the Japanese international school or schools for the German community here and so on. Then because of all that Guy alluded to, and a little bit about what you said as well, Heath, with the expansion of education across the world, in Malaysia, we then saw the introduction of foreign curriculum schools. So these are schools that would offer the American curriculum, the Australian curriculum, the British or Cambridge curriculum, and SIS, we offer the Canadian curriculum. And down south in Johor, we also have a few schools that offer the Singaporean curriculum. I just want to submit here that perhaps the curriculum that is native to a particular country as their national curriculum may not always be an international curriculum. And just to contrast that with the international baccalaureate curriculum, for example, which does not belong to any particular country, that curriculum tries to bring together as diversity and respect for different thoughts and ideas. So coming back to Malaysia again, we also have schools that are private schools that evolved or that started with the national curriculum. And because of the opening up or the liberalizing of education in Malaysia, they also started to offer a foreign curriculum, and essentially that would be the British or Cambridge curriculum. And so that also is in the space, yeah, for parents to consider. And last but not least, and I won't spend too much time on it because I think the definition or the categorization is sort of quite self-explanatory. We've got mission schools now that offer private education. They offer options to parents, and they serve not just particular religious needs. They also serve a secular market of parents looking for schooling for their children. And in Malaysia, the boarding schools that we have typically would reside or would come from a British or an American boarding school culture. Yeah, and I just want to again challenge parents to say that may not necessarily be an international context. And I look forward to a day whereby we have also boarding schools, yeah, from other parts of the world, like Asia, for example. So I hope that gives parents a sort of snippet about the landscape in Malaysia. Clearly, the most popular option are the British or Cambridge curriculum schools, by number at least. We also see that there is a trend towards more and more schools offering dual, as in, the national system, for example, together with the British option. And I foresee the evolution or the movement towards a bi-curricular offering in many schools. But last but not least, I just want to wrap up by saying there could be very many options, but our children require one type of schooling system or one particular curriculum. And it really should be one that fits parents' aspirations, the child's learning styles and learning needs, and so on. So I think that should be a very critical point in our consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Obviously, the term international schools is not a simple one to define based on the slide that you presented. Elizabeth, I'd like to ask you your thoughts. When parents are examining and evaluating international schools, what are some of the many aspects that you've found that they're looking for?
If I may ask for this slide to be shown. Thank you, Heath, and good evening to everybody here. When I first registered my daughter for an international school, one of the very few affordable international school back in 2009, there were less than 30 international schools in the whole of Malaysia, and most of these international schools back then were predominantly meant for the Western expat community, with a few new ones catering more for Malaysians, including those with foreign spouse or those returning from overseas, which was the case for us. We returned from Singapore. Fast forward today, 2021, the last I checked, there are 191 privately owned schools with international school license. So that basically means that Malaysian parents today are spoiled for choice. And it also means that we have schools catering to a variety of needs, parents' needs and budget as well. And because of that, when looking for the right international school, other than focusing on curriculum, school fees, obviously the medium of delivery, which is English, and also typically parents would mention quality of teachers. I believe parents should also look into various factors as shown on the screen right now. For one, obviously we all know that tuition's fee differ. It ranges from around 2,000 ringgit per month to some 10,000 ringgit a month. So one of them would be, I think, something that parents often miss out when searching for the right school, being the school culture. And it's very often that they only find out about the school culture when the child is enrolled. I experienced that situation in two previous international schools, where I've always assumed the international schools in general, they're pretty much the same, school cultures are the same, there's certain expected behavior and so forth. Parents may ask, what does it mean by school cultures? Basically, school cultures refer to the expected behaviors and values that impact how the school operates, which to me can very much influence the teaching approach, disciplinary policy, and so on. And that, I believe, has to do with not so much the curriculum, but often I realize it has to do with school ownership, leadership team they hire, how they market the school, the teachers and families they attract, as part of that whole marketing to be part of their community. Another example, parent community. Some international schools welcome parental involvement, particularly for our primary school level, such as helping out with guided reading, chaperoning for field trips, international week decoration, and so forth. Of course, we do have parents who just want to drop their kids off to school, while we also have parents like myself, who am very keen to somewhat be involved in my children learning, especially when they were in primary school. So these are some of the things that, I believe parents, especially with primary school kids, may want to consider. I personally believe in partnership with children learning, again, especially when they are in primary school. Accreditation is something that is not really talked about much. So I'd like to draw parents' attention to these questions. Have you ever wondered who governs any particular international school in terms of upholding to the required academic integrity and also the operations of the school to be what we call the international standards? Based on my 12 years experience having my children in international school, it is really down to the school itself. One top question asked by parents since MCO last year was, who could they complain to if an international school is perceived to be underperforming or not offering sufficient hours of interactive lessons per day, especially when there's a drastic move from in-person learning to online learning, or on fees related matters, especially such as the case of refund of security deposit upon withdrawal. So now, of course, there are optional accreditations bodies out there where we do have ambitious international schools who choose to go through, they will go through accreditation, such as with the Council of International Schools, CIS, which is really a process that recognizes schools that meet the international standards of operations. We do have other types of accreditations, more specific towards the academic integrity, such as the IB and, obviously in SIS, the Ontario High School Curriculum. Obviously, parents are not always clear about how they assess schools based on these variables. My advice has always been to start with a list of what parents consider as important to them, taking into considerations of their child, their learning needs, and then set priorities. Obviously, these decisions will be guided by their budgets and locations as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was very informative. And from the perspective of a teacher, when we meet up with parents, we hear what the concerns are, but that was a very comprehensive rundown. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can I have the next slide, please? So we put this together, and I'll get into another set of questions for our panelists, but I just want to present this to our guest tonight. Obviously, how parents select the right international school. And these are a number of things that Elizabeth was just speaking about, and things that we'll be revisiting as the evening goes on. The language of English is one of them. That was one of the points that Guy talked about. Academic outcomes, reliable pathways. You want to make sure, of course, that your children are going to make it on that academic pathway to whatever that post-secondary destination might be. What is the curriculum? What's the teacher quality accreditation? Again, these are things that I think every parent has a duty to ask about these aspects and more, and not assume that because a school has opened it up and it calls itself an international school and it's got affordable fees and it's got good marketing, that they're hitting all of these and all of the important aspects. So, you know, again, this is something that is critically important amongst many other things for every parent to be aware of. Okay, so just let me get into my questions here. So Elizabeth, following up what you said, when we hear the term international school, and I put it in quotes here in my notes, when we hear the term international school, outside of the curriculum, what should parents be looking for? And you talked about culture very much earlier. So what else can, in your experience, have parents been looking for in international schools?
Yeah, may I have the slides, please? Yeah, the Education Ministry licensing defines an international school as one that is not offering the Malaysian national curriculum. If I may, for the sake of tonight's discussions, I'm going to reference international school as those that aims to provide holistic educations, you know, promoting critical thinking, freedom of expressions, you know, mindsets, lifelong learning, attitude, international mindedness, a school that welcome diversity in their school community, not just the teachers, the students as well, and do deliberately plan and carry out activities to involve as many students as possible. I won't elaborate too much more. They're pretty much summarized on the screen right now. I believe most parents, when they look at international school, this is what they have in mind. The questions then really is as parents go to look and hunt for the right school, the right budget, the right location, and all this is, you know, very often they are presented with, I think, very similar diagrams and, you know, and terminology, marketing terminology in terms of holistic education and so forth. I think it will be very useful for parents then to ask, you know, how are each of and every single elements that define holistic educations are actually being carried out in the school, because it can be done, it can mean very differently to individual schools. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Guy, I'll turn back to you now. How about yourself? Do you think the factors that Elizabeth has been talking about and that we've been discussing, how do you think those have impacted student development and growth and growth of international schools?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think, you know, sort of Elizabeth sort of mentioned sort of, you know, some of the schools that are coming in, and I don't think, you know, connections with old brand names are necessarily particularly important. I think, or how fancy your building is, or how many soccer pitches you have. You know, ultimately, I think the important thing is the quality of the teaching, and that has got to be at the forefront. And, you know, we know that from the research that we've done globally, that students and parents will choose institutions. I mean, the reputation is important, but that reputation is built on the quality of the teaching staff. You know, we all know from our own experience, teachers who've inspired us to take a particular subject and perhaps led us down a road or a path that we otherwise wouldn't have taken. But I also think that good teaching can't exist in a vacuum. Teachers need resources, they need support, they need the continual training and professional development, which marks out, you know, a real quality school. Also, I think they need autonomy and freedom from bureaucracy. And unfortunately, and this is not just true of Malaysia, it's true of every state system, that teachers become mired in bureaucracy and red tape in the state systems. And often that's why they leave the state systems. They can't teach, they can't follow their passion. So quality teachers leave state systems to come to international schools and private schools across the world. I think, as Elizabeth mentioned, the culture. And I think the culture is about high expectations for academic excellence. It's about that supportive school culture that encourages students to take risks, as well as being happy, as well as being confident. And also, again, that idea of holistic education, so that we're preparing students to be young people to be global citizens, responsible, caring global citizens. And I think, the final step really is when we look at it from an employer's point of view, and they're looking for schools that have developed, and people rather, who've got, developed creativity, inquiry skills, self-confidence, social skills, critical thinking skills, as well as academic proficiency, of course, and as well as high levels of English. And, I think that whole holistic approach is so important. But, please remember, I think the quality of the teaching is the ultimate factor in how we're going to develop our children effectively.
Thank you. You made a good point, and once in a while I feel like I sound like a broken record. I keep repeating the same thing over and over, no matter how many parents I talk to. But you touched on something that that I've been really trying to get across, and that is it's not just about the content anymore. Content is not enough to prepare our students for whatever comes after 2021, right? Content is important, but again, it's so much more in terms of skills that students will need to have. And we've all heard that there are so many jobs that will exist in the next 20 years that don't exist yet.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to train for content? We can't, but we can train for the skills that are necessary. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. Mian, I'll turn to you now. How can you ensure that parents and students at SIS are going to be able to meet the long list of these elements?
Yeah, thanks, Heath, for that question. And I think, well, just like the first slide you showed, there are 10 top criteria that parents look at, and Elizabeth also touched on very similar frames of reference. I think firstly, all schools cover basic aspects of learning that students need to acquire, and you've said it very well, so too has Guy. At the same time, I think at a higher level, every school focuses on particular areas with greater emphasis, or and these are the strengths of the school. So I think for SIS, we try to help parents by understanding the parents. So I think Elizabeth said it very well just now. Elizabeth, I don't know if I'm quoting you right, but you said parents have their own list, yeah? Yes. And obviously the school, we have our list in terms of what our strengths are and what we believe, education is about. And Heath being, being a principal, you've got your set of criteria, as it were. So I think at SIS, it's very important that we have this constant engagement with parents. We do it both formally and informally. The formal structures include parent councils, regular parent-teacher sessions every semester, running surveys. I had a parent who wrote to me and said, Mian, it may be pandemic times and the school may be closed, but don't forget the surveys can still run. And I think that's ever so important, as well as informal sessions, and you can see it there. But I think very much what Elizabeth mentioned just now is that I think we can help parents meet their selection criteria by doing a very important part, and that's to ensure the quality, and the accreditation or the ratings that come with it. So you asked about SIS. So parents, I'm sorry, I'll speak from the SIS perspective that to us, it's so important that we maintain that approval, that endorsement that comes from not just one, but two ministries of education. I saw a question just now from one of our participants or someone in the audience referring to the local regulators. And so we hope we have time to draw some discussion on that. So back to SIS, we not only meet the inspection and the quality requirements of two ministries of education, but because we are sort of a dual curriculum school, we also have to work on the IB requirements, which really addresses a lot of the internationalization of education that I hope parents, that you continue to explore and examine and find for yourself what to you would be an international curriculum. And you can see from the slide there that we also, pay attention to the Ministry of Education's rating system like SCIPS, because to us, that endorsement of 5 stars, for example, that we have as a school tells parents that, not only is the record keeping appropriate, but that translates into the culture of the school. And again, Elizabeth spoke on that. So, you know, we'll see if that comes up later as a question. But all these accreditation or rating systems, I think, are important aspects to guide parents' selection. And last but not least, I think very important as a responsibility in this particular area, answering your question, Principal Condro, is that schools must stay progressive. And I just want to say that you talked about, a few of us talked about earlier on, you know, the soft skills, you know, the cultural appreciation and respect. But I think we need to go even beyond the 6 C's now. That's sort of a given. Although we are only 2 decades into the 21st century, I think today schools are also responsible to guide parents or to assist parents in terms of developing their children as digitally literate individuals for the present and the future world. And I think environmental stewardship is often talked about, but perhaps more can still be done through, you know, the education system. So I hope that addresses, that question that you've posed to me. Heath, thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we'll certainly try and get back to the question in the chat, and I'll probably address that to you, Mian, a little bit later. So as we enter our last 3 questions for our panelists, I'm just going to bring up a few things here on the slide before I get into my next set of questions. So we're looking at what's more, what are some of the emerging factors from parents during the pandemic, specific to the last 16 months. So obviously, online learning provisions has been a very, very big one. And these are certainly in no order of priority. Student well-being, I think if you were to talk to any school, you would find that the issue of student well-being and mental health, as well as staff and parents, everybody is more aware. Given what we've all gone through in the past 16 months, health and safety as well, fee payment flexibility, contact time between teachers and parents. So there's a number of new things that they might not be new, but they've certainly taken on a new priority, or they have become, they've changed in terms of their rank and priority. So considering that, Guy, I'll go to you. For the past, 16 months, how much does the pandemic impact overall education at the moment?
Well, I think it's been absolutely devastating to children globally. And I should thank a colleague, Nina Disney from Leap Education, who I know is in the audience, for helping me with some of the reports from the OECD and from UNICEF, which I'll put in the chat later so people have access to, which really give a fascinating insight globally into the effects of the pandemic. And I think there's overwhelming evidence on the impact of school closures on children. And that's despite increasing evidence on the other side that children are not really drivers of the pandemic. And I think too many countries have opted to keep schools closed, some for nearly a year. Schools are essential for children's learning, health, safety and well-being. And for the most vulnerable children, school closures have in some cases deprived them of their one nutritious meal a day. Children living in violent or dysfunctional family settings who might rely on school to provide the only safe and nurturing environment that they have. They've been cut off from that safety net. So I think the effects are absolutely devastating. And as we enter the second year of this COVID pandemic, and as cases continue to increase around the world, I think all efforts should be made to get schools open. And we should prioritize them in reopening plans. Children just can't afford another year of school closures. And I think the MOE here needs to really consider schools as an essential service. We've got a long list of 18 categories of factories that are regarded as essential services. And for much of this year, golf courses have been open and dining in restaurants has been open, but schools haven't been. And I think we've got our priorities wrong. So, of course, kids in international schools like mine and obviously Sunway International Schools, the parents are reasonably well resourced. The kids have a very supportive environment. There's been work on flipped classrooms. Most children will have access to their own devices, as well as already being trained in self-learning initiatives. You know, we've already talked about the curriculum that trains that, the holistic approach, etc. So international schools are far better placed and can be far more resilient and independent. So much better placed, as I say, to respond to this crisis. But I really worry for the B40 and the other, you know, marginalized groups who don't have similar access. So sorry to be so pessimistic, but, you know, as we come out of the other end of this, I think, you know, we may regret the decisions we are taking now. So I think, you know, just going back to my opening remarks, I think the effects on children around the world are devastating. You know, 214 million kids are losing 75% of their classroom, and some of them just won't come back to school again, which is really sad. So that's my feeling at the moment. I hope that will change over the next few months as governments maybe come to terms with some of the issues more carefully. Think about the issues more carefully.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth, as Guy was speaking, I noticed that you were nodding. Maybe you'd like to just tell us your perspective as a parent. Past 16 months, what are some of your observations and concerns from the parent's perspective?
I just want to address what Guy mentioned about the reopening plan. On that, I do hope that in the event that schools in Malaysia continue to be closed in the next couple of months, and that's really based on the government's reopening plan, I do hope that you know, with more businesses being open, international schools in general could actually receive an autonomy from the Ministry of Education to you know, to open up, shall the I know those particular school is able to fulfill the strict SOP requirements. Again, a guy mentions that, you know, students in international school, the families are a lot more supportive, are more, you know, I imagine more conforming to the SOP, the strict requirements are imposed by individual schools. So that's my hope, actually. In terms of coming up, I foresee, as we know, the pandemic is, especially in Malaysia context, is going to linger around for the next 6 months, hopefully max, or 9 months. And as such, I foresee continuous schooling disruptions with more virtual schoolings or on-off online / in-person learning taking place. I believe what's going to get parents to continue value international school is, again, back to the holistic aspect of what international school are expected to offer, but you know, in a more hybrid, digitized, flip manner. May I have the slides that I have?
Please.
Like to present the three.
Yep.
So as we know, in the last 16 months, more and more international schools are ramping up in terms of offering lessons online, and based on feedback, I believe more schools are doing pretty well on that. Academic integrity, quality of teaching and learning, including feedback, assessments, will always be of high priority. Again, digitizations has taken place pretty well, and that has attracted, based on what I have, based on speaking to parents from public schools, that has attracted parents from the public school to really consider international school, to have as little disruptions as possible. It is, I guess, a little unfair because, you know, it is something that is an option that is open to those who are willing to pay a little bit more for private educations. Now, if we look at the screen, aspect 2 and 3 are going to require very deliberate kind of innovation planning and executions, especially during the virtual learning environment, because it is very difficult to digitize them directly. Areas such as, student development frameworks, activities that used to take place in person with, putting a bunch of kids in a class or in a place playing football, basketballs, encouraging team building, leadership, that will have to take form in a digital manner or in a social distancing manner. And I believe that is something that international school in general, in upkeeping to holistic education, could really innovate and think forward in terms of how to offer them to their students. In the case of students' well-being, we will definitely need more attentive pastoral care. School community and a sense of belonging. Research suggests that students with high sense of belongings are also happier, healthier, and more engaged learners. So this particular aspect is definitely very important. Again, how can this be digitized? Do not also forget about new students who are joining the school. In the past, you put a couple of kids in the room, they kind of nudge each other, they see each other again during break times, and they kind of just form friendships. It is very, very different now during the online learning, especially if they started, the first term being a new students, and they are put in a virtual classroom with everybody else, where the moment lessons ends and it's goodbye, everybody switch off. So these are something that I believe international schools in general should look into. Again, the next is not forgetting proper farewells to graduating students who are leaving the school for other reasons. I believe these are some of the other areas that should be taken into considerations as well. To me, and again, based on speaking to various parents, the combinations of aspect 1, 2, 3 are typically what we will consider as a complete holistic education, and these are the expectations from international school. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Our last official question, the formal question that we've got lined up, is for Dr. Mian. So Mian, how are international schools, or SIS in particular, responding to the pandemic, and what are the plans moving forward?
Thanks, Heath. Well, I think the pandemic has put everyone on a very steep learning curve. Yeah, I don't think anyone can deny that there were big lessons and important lessons learned. I'd like to answer your question by maybe pinpointing a particular a common response. I think most of us say, okay, going forward, what can teachers do better and the schools do better? I think the focus on teachers, because teaching and learning does involve the teacher, but it doesn't always start and end with the teacher. So I'd like to respond to your question by saying that we've discovered that certain things that we've done before, that we've put at the sidelines, all right, have become main stage or center stage. So for example, as a school, we will need to resource the school even more greatly, in terms of technology and teachers' expertise, because although SIS started as a laptop school in 2008, we were already having programs on the sidelines most of the time, but promoting flipped classroom, different forms of blended learning. Yet the pandemic the pandemic pushed the importance of all these initiatives to center stage. So we really need the school to fast track to become a digital age school. We learned that the younger kids are not spared of having to go through learning remotely, because when the school is closed, even the younger ones have to learn from home. And so it also forces us in a good way to look at how we can make learning, technology in education or educational technology more personal and more relevant to younger children. I don't think it's not possible with augmented reality and artificial intelligence. It's about putting the right people and expertise together for us to develop in that way. So of course, we know that the teachers need more professional development to become more effective, deliverers of learning, especially when they are not just face-to-face online. But I also want to challenge that we also need to help our students, our children, learn how to be effective learners online. You know, just as we learned how to study in the traditional classroom setting, our children also need to learn how do they be successful in a digitally digitally active and biased society, because going forward, they're not just digital natives. They are going to live lives as digital nomads, but learning on demand and wherever wherever they are. I think the other learning point I had, and this is really through conversations with parents, you know, is that for a long time, I think, and I'm a working parent for many years, a working mother, that we have somehow sort of become a second tier or a secondary level of learning with our children. I like to again use Elizabeth's example. I think Elizabeth said that when her children were younger, she was particularly interested in having that learning partnership with the schools that her children were in. And so I think going forward, SIS would really like to bring parents into that learning equation and ecosystem. We are now talking about learning platforms and software or solutions where parents have access to, because children's learning don't stop when the school bell rings. Yeah, they will continue at home. And rather than in the past where the parents just supervise, I think the pandemic has forced us to really look at things differently and become actively engaged with our children's development. So I think, yeah, I submit these are the new directions, yeah, that I think will impact us as schools going forward. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. As we wrap up the evening, I'll come back to you, Guy. Do you have any final thoughts that you might want to leave us with tonight before we depart?
No, I mean, just to say, I think, you know, we started the topic with why international schools will remain the choice of many parents, and I think probably the pandemic has made that question even more stark to a large extent. I mean, I will go back with my concerns about the wider effects of the pandemic on schooling in general, and I still feel that, you know, that there are major issues there. My work is mainly in the university sector, and I'm very concerned about mental health, isolation of students, particularly international students. And I know, you know, obviously Sunway also has a number of international students, both in their schools and their universities, and that's also a major issue that is really problematic if institutions are going to remain closed for a long time. So I think that's probably my closing remarks. But yeah, international schools will still remain the choice of many parents, answering the question of the topic today.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, do you have any parting thoughts for us before we depart this evening?
I'm actually hoping that, you know, the international schools body, maybe AIMS, will actually get together and, you know, organize, you know, international school competitions. I know, you know, we used to have ISACs and all sort of stuff. I know for BCA, which is it more British based, for BCA has organized quite a number of virtual events or competitions which allow schools to, you know, compete with one another for the sake of fun, you know, getting things going, picking up all the learning skills. It would be nice to have that going in Malaysia for the international schools as well. I mean, we are on our 16 months of you know, disruptions. A lot can still take place online, virtually. I know a school has a couple of schools has done their virtual MUN, but for some reason it wasn't really shared among the international school community of Malaysia. You know, the nice thing with the whole pandemic is that you get to compete with people from overseas and such. Right. You know, the local scenes is a little bit quiet. So it would be nice if the international school administrations, the leaders, will get together and, you know, kind of get that going. I think as parents, you know, would like to see our kids, you know, going out there, participating, not just participating, but, you know, representing their school, you know, that kind of, you know, get them to be attached, recognize they have that sense of belonging to the school. And I think that is important because the pandemic is going to be here at 6-9 months, and they'll be back to school, and, you know, they look forward to meeting their friends, and, you know, all these activities that take place will help make it easier for them to reconnect back when they see each other again. Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Dr. Mian, any final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Heath. And yes, I do. I think I like to go back to the question that we all gathered for tonight, which is why, why are international schools still a choice for parents? And I'll twist it to say, why will international schools continue to grow? So aside the factors that Guy had mentioned, I think we should not be distracted or pulled away from the overall trajectory of the world. The world will continue to globalize. The world will continue to become less of a silo and more merged and fuse space. Now, your children will, if they work in Malaysia, they will not be just working with Malaysians. I will put my name to it as an old person, and you can, you can corner me on it. Your children will be working with people from all over the world. And chances may be your son or daughter may not be even working in Malaysia, but working somewhere else. But they will not feel it because the global space would be a very different space. And so I think international education is required and it's the way forward. Like Guy said, perhaps the rate of change or the rate of growth may be impacted. So the overall trajectory, I think, remains clear. It will be a more global space, a more, combined and merged and fused space. And therefore, international education is required for all of us to be happy. Yeah, lest we read more of those headlines that we sometimes wonder, about between some big superpowers of the world. Yeah, so. Yeah, so that's from me, and I just want to, on behalf of SIS, because we are the host for this, just appreciate Elizabeth and Guy for joining, and some of the people in the audience. I see some friends as well, and I know Heath, you will do that, but I just want to say thank you to the friends that have joined us in the audience as well. Thank you, Heath. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Guy.
You're welcome.
And on that, Dr. Mian has said exactly what I was planning on saying, which is thank you for joining us on your Friday evening, ladies and gentlemen. I've been really impressed with the turnout on a late Friday night, and we're very pleased to have you join our SIS Coffee Talk series. Again, Elizabeth, Guy, Mian, thank you for your thoughts, for your input, for your preparation, and giving your time tonight to our discussion. It's very, very much appreciated, and I speak on behalf of all of our guests tonight that have registered. Thank you for your time and your thoughts, and we really genuinely appreciate it. So thank you very, very much. And to our guests that have joined us, again, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time out to join us, and we will have another coffee talk session in September of 2021, and we will send out that invite to everybody as well. So have yourselves a wonderful weekend, a safe weekend, and thank you again. On behalf of Sunway International School, again, have a good evening. Goodbye, everyone.